Hello, my name is Ed Newbold. I'm a wildlife artist at the Pike Place Market. I ran this ad on August 15th. Now the main point of the ad is that granting eminent domain to Line 3 or any other pipeline is an unconstitutional subsidy. That's the main point. Now bear in mind I'm not a lawyer, thankfully, or a constitutional law expert. As a matter of fact, I'm a painter, and this is my latest painting. I'll move out of the way a little bit. That's the Friday Harbor, and I always put a critter in. And this, I'm going back to the well with osprey again. That's the 5th time I painted ospreys in a painting, but you run out of birds that are animals that are around that have gravitas. But I understand that the courts have been very hard on my line of reasoning. The Supreme Court has been lackadaisical about putting any restrictions whatsoever on what can be seen as a public use for the last 70 years. But what I'm saying is that the Supreme Court is wrong. It's been wandering in the wilderness. But there's no reason that the rest of us all have to wander out there with them. In one famously botched Supreme Court decision on eminent domain in early 2000s, Kello versus New London, one of the plaintiffs was an 82-year-old woman who wanted to live out her days in the house that she lived in all her life. They ruled against her. The house got bulldozed. But then the city's project fell through. So now on her property you can go see a grassy area and a monument dedicated to all the victims around the world of eminent domain. And that includes a lot of people who have been pushed out for dams, by the way. But a book on the New London case, the ramifications of it and its effect on law, is called The Grasping Hand. But the Constitution is clear. It says eminent domain can only be used for public use. It's easy to see why private oil and gas pipelines have become conflated with public use. There is the sloppy but easy argument that since everybody needs to buy gas and everybody wants it as cheap as they can get it, it may feel like public use. But it's clearly not in the spirit of the Constitution. If the framers had meant that eminent domain was for private use, they would have written it that way. What they wrote, they didn't have to predict climate change was going to happen. It doesn't matter. They wrote what they meant. It's a good document. And it would have outlawed, it should have outlawed private pipelines from the beginning. Regardless of whether people knew that the stuff inside the pipelines was destroying the planet or not, all the courts had to do was enforce the Constitution, and we never would have had subsidized pipelines. By the way, it's important to note that we would have probably had pipelines. It wouldn't have killed pipelines. The companies could multiply their generosity to the landowners and to the hosting counties and jurisdictions and spread a lot of money around, a whole lot of money, and pay them energy transshipment fees. That's something we should all think about, energy transshipment fees that would help rural counties with their finances. Eventually, if enough money were offered, landowners would be lining up to suggest routes to the companies. But under this free market scenario, it would cost a whole heck of a lot more money for the pipeline company to put in a pipeline than it does currently when they can rely on the thug-like power of eminent domain. Now, all the economists that I buy into would say that allowing the pricing of pipelines to be determined in the free market would result in more efficiencies for the economy. It would result in everyone being richer. Under this scenario, there's more jobs, more everything, and even though the price of one commodity is going to shoot up or go up, and if the price of gasoline went higher, less gasoline would be used, and the climate forcing would be eased by that amount. Be good for the climate. That was the target issue of my ad. But I threw in a couple of other things here saying, when humans are done destroying the earth, many will look back and blame capitalism. And then I say, but it wasn't capitalism. The tar sand, the line 3 only exists because of government intervention into the free market, essentially. And the ad basically acquits capitalism of being at fault for climate change, and even a lot of people who are fairly comfortable with capitalism and like capitalism might not be comfortable with the idea that it's completely not at fault for climate change. And I also implied a whole lot of pessimism that humanity will ever do anything real to stop climate change. I obviously need to keep this short, but let me try to back up those 2 points. First of all, I'm completely pessimistic. I would say nothing that is being done, nothing that has been done, nothing that is being planned to be done is even remotely likely to slow or stop climate change. The infrastructure package is a great example, and I say this even though I view Joe Biden as a great hero for his role in helping to save democracy. But very few people have pointed out that building over $100 billion of roads and bridges and paying for it with a non-user fee will be creating a new $100+ billion subsidy to promote climate change, make it hotter. And so far, more or less everything being done, has been done to address climate change is a government mandate or a subsidy or new government program that seeks to spend money on something. None will have a significant effect on the market for fossil fuels or energy because they all leave the fundamentals of the market completely untouched, unchanged. There have been recent advances in energy efficiency, say LEDs. But LEDs don't result in reduced energy use overall because markets will clear. The fossil fuel or electricity left on the table is going to get swooped up by somebody. It's at the same low price it always was. It'll be grabbed. New demand will arise. One thing that happened when LEDs came in is that people decided to put up more lights at night, creating more light pollution and bringing the energy use right back up. 3 other good examples of new energy use that is coming in as we become more efficient and use less energy. They'll taking up the slack and using it back again are indoor marijuana growing, cryptocurrency mining, and space travel tourism. Thanks, Jeff. Similarly, the massive build-out of wind and solar looks impressive to people, but it isn't doing a thing to slow climate change because, again, it's leaving the fossil fuel market untouched. All it's doing is killing bats and birds and stealing habitat from desert plants and animals. Similarly, biofuel and biomass mandates that have been sold to a gullible press as climate solutions when they were actually making the problem worse. Ethanol uses so much land, 40% of our massive corn crop goes to ethanol, that it is displacing agriculture into the tropics, and so we are partly to blame for the current. Not only does it increase climate change, make it worse, ethanol is worse than gasoline even for putting climate pollution in the air, but it's also what makes us partly to blame for the fact that there's so much killing of land defenders. Indigenous people trying to defend their land in the Brazilian Amazon are being murdered by the score, and it's partly our fault. Thanks a lot, ethanol. And we are partly to blame because of our insistence on thinking green and acting yellow. Biomass, which is a fancy name for burning forests, has been corruptly designated a renewable fuel in Europe and England, and that's resulted in many forests being destroyed in the name of saving the environment. Orwell would understand. Similarly, carbon sequestration and hydrogen power are more examples of rent-seeking. Rent-seeking is the practice by government, by business or industry, of seeking freebies from government, and it creates businesses whose main product is the lobbyist. the very good lobbyists who can get Congress to give yet more money or more rules that create a money stream for a corporation or an industry. Nothing good will come from sequestration or hydrogen power. These are socialized solutions that will not work. Capitalism offers a way out of climate change, although it would be near about impossible politically to implement because it would make prices go up, the price of gas and price of other carbon-involved products. But it could be beautiful. Here's how it would work. Democratic governments would decide to spend no more general tax money on subsidizing climate change. They would dismantle every subsidy, and there are many, vast numbers of subsidies, including hidden ones, many hidden ones. Here's an example of a small hidden subsidy. Our Port of Seattle, here in Seattle, it's a county port, but they call it Port of Seattle, it doesn't make a profit. It will never make a profit because it doesn't have to. And we have to pay tax money to keep it going. Well, that's basically a subsidy. That port should be turning back money to the taxpayers and helping the taxpayers pay for education and health and other things governments do. But instead, it's on the dole. And that money that it's on the dole, and the money that it doesn't turn in profits, is a subsidy for climate change because it's basically helping to lower the price of jet travel and cargo, international cargo, big tanker, not tanker, but freighter ships. Eliminating all subsidies would be a massive and meaningful first step. The second key step would be for democratic governments to resolve to spend no more money from the general fund on addressing the impacts of climate change. All money spent addressing the harm of climate change would from now on have to be raised by taxing the offending pollutant. You could call these taxes or you could call them externality fees. But if we needed more money to fight fires because of climate change, we wouldn't fight those fires unless we raise the money for fighting those fires from a carbon tax or another fossil fuel tax. If we need to help coastal dwellers relocate, we wouldn't do it unless that money came from the taxes on the pollutant. These policies would bring the price of carbon up, and what they would do is they would bring the price that we pay up closer to the actual cost that it imposes on us. It might be politically untenable because the price of fossil fuels might start to get really high, and unless people really thought they wanted to stop climate change, you might get a rebellion like you had in France with the Yellow Jackets turning the cars over. But so why are people unwilling to do anything serious about climate change? What if the world was getting colder? What if there was snow in London in July? What if New York Harbor was beginning to freeze over in the winter and you couldn't get ships in there? Humans would be on it so fast it would make your head spin. There wouldn't be falling for biofuel. They wouldn't be falling for biomass. They wouldn't be falling for carbon sequestration or hydrogen or low carbon standard or cap and trade, another hideous fraud. Why does the culture as a whole not care that what we've done so far has been a failure or worse? That what Germany, Great Britain, and Europe are doing is a failure. Why don't we re-examine ethanol? Why do even the climate-aware journalists not seem to question things like cap and trade, low carbon standard, and all these programs that are just great cover for greenwashing and rent-seeking? Why do we not want react when people say the infrastructure package will fight climate change by building more roads. I mean, this is Orwellian. War is peace. There is an answer. The reason we don't do this is because we're humans. And all of us humans, me and everyone else, we're all tropical species. We arose from the Garden of Eden or equatorial Africa. I'm not going to get into that little debate. But we're tropical species. The most successful economies now are up in the temperate zone, but humans can't stand the temperate zone winter, and they're basically hate the cold, and they're trying to do something about it in the back of their brain. And I'm saying that's all of us. It's in the back of my brain too, I'm sure. When I say how do you defeat that? The fact that we all have a conflict of interest because we're human beings. We can't stand the winter. People say I like the winter, but those are people that have access to technology like down parkas and hot chocolate and central heating and things like that, and clothing. But now maybe climate change is getting so real that we are all suddenly understanding that we're not creating a tropical wonderland with climate change. I ran out of my script here. We're not creating that. We're creating a place where the streams dry up, the creeks dry up, the rivers dry up, the wells dry up. When you're in Tucson, you lean down to get some water. Maybe nothing will come out. People will be moving by the millions from places where there is no water and there's no viable agriculture. They will be headed for places that they think are going to be better. You don't want to be in the place they're leaving, and you don't want to be in the place they're staying. They're going to. So we've got to do something about this. We have to save beautiful critters and nature for the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. We have to stop this. And the first thing we can do is stop the most egregious subsidies, like eminent domain for Line 3, and go Ojibwe Indians for fighting Line 3. Let's all help them. We can stop this. And thank you very much, Ed Newbold, Seattle Pike Place Market. My store is at First and Pike, Seattle, Washington. Thank you very much.